Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Thank you very much for finding me, and if you're new here, I grow or try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids either outside or inside or not at all here in Melbourne, Australia. So do follow my continuing very amateur adventures I post every Friday. But today, plant lovers, field work. Yes, we are outside just because it's a little easier to deal with the things that we're going to talk about, which are hanging right behind me. And that is a fantastic dendrobium which I just bought off Facebook Marketplace. And it is, ta-da, Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody. There we are. And there it is, as you can see, really going for it. But what we're going to look at today is how I received these orchids, which was in the Mail Rhapsody newspaper, and how I went about potting them, and a bit of a potted history, pardon the pun, about Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody. So here we are. This one is actually white, and a white version of it, and I also have the pink version, which is hanging up here. There you go. Look at that. Look at all that new growth. Amazing plants, pink and white. But you know what? Let me step back in time and show you how I received these and then how I went about repotting them. And then we'll come back to learn a little bit more about this fantastic orchid. Well, here we are outside, and so these are the dendrobiums as I received them. Wrapped in newspaper and sphagnum moss, as you can see, and lots of new growth, and I've been keeping them moist because they did arrive midweek and it's now Sunday. I just haven't had a chance to pot them up yet, plant lovers. So I was a bit anxious, but it wasn't so warm all week, so that is good. It's going to be very warm next week, so today is the day to pot. I'm very happy about that. And I think my issue in the past has been I've received things bare rooted but in winter, and I've potted them and they've just sat there obviously in stasis until the season should kick on in spring, but of course by that point they've rotted or weren't happy with life anyway. So I think late spring, early summer is a great time for me to receive such dendrobiums and to repot them. And I have bought these off-the-shelf sort of orchid pots, which you can get from hardware stores here in Australia, which have just got these 4 slits around the side and these wire sort of hangery things, and I'm going to fashion my own hanging basket for these dendrobiums and then hang them up in bright indirect light. That is the plan. Let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing to do is to get the wires into the pot so that I can then pot straight into it. And there are 4 wires and 4 holes, so this should be relatively easy. These you can get from any orchid supplier online, and the pots, as I said, came from a hardware store. I'll just bend them all in the same spot so I should get the same length. Ta-da! And then thread them through. There we are. There's our basic hanging pot. And now number 2. There we are. So these are much easier to hang. So I'm going to use fairly largish medium bark, large medium, and I'm also just going to mix in some sphagnum moss. Okay, let's do the first plant. Let's have a look at it first of all, shall we? All right, so this one is Dendrobium White Bohemian Rhapsody. There we are, the white form. Excellent. And then, oh, wow, lots of keikis on there actually. And lots of growth. So I'm just going to pop that as it is, and I'm going to reuse this sphagnum moss that it travelled in. Pop that in there. All right, so there is our plant. I'm just going to integrate that sphagnum. Let's put that in there, like that. And then just a soupçon of mycorrhizae fungi. There we are. And some slow release fertilizer pellets. And in we go. Not very scientific. There we are. And then just backfilling that with moss and bark. There's number 1. It looks a bit scrappy at the moment. Oh, I think I've buried the end of that. There we are. Pot number 1 looks a bit scrappy, but hopefully this new growth will take over. And I might actually just take off some of these keikis with their new roots. and just pot them in the pot. There we are. One down, one to go. Okay, this should then be the pink form. Let's see what the tag says. Dendrobium Pink Bohemian Rhapsody. There we are. And once again, I'm going to keep that old sphagnum moss, and basically in exactly the same condition as the other. Lots of old roots from the previous plant, lots of new roots coming out of the new growth. I'm not really going to prune this, you know, I'm just going to pop it in as it is, because these old roots will give some stability to the plant. And there's quite a few keikis again on this, which I am going to take off and pop back into the main pot with the other plants. So I'll just do that now. There we are. And this one looking very vigorous. So interesting that this has so many keikis, because one of the species ancestors is Dendrobium loddigesii, which produces mad keikis all along the stems of the plant. So I wonder if this trait has come from that species ancestor, but it gives you the opportunity for lots of new plants. Okay, in with our pot. Let's get that sphagnum moss mixed in. A little bit of mycorrhizal fungi powder. Some slow release fertilizer pellets, and in we go. That is a big plant. There we are. Tuck all those roots in and backfill. And then the little keikis, I'm just going to pop in the side. They'll either make it or they won't. Dendrobium Pink Bohemian Rhapsody. Ta-da! Well, there we are, plant lovers. Two fabulously potted dendrobiums, one pink, one white. Let's see how we go. Look at all the growth though. It is the perfect time of year to be repotting and to be receiving these and to be potting them on. So it is very, very early summer here. I could have done it a month ago even, in late spring. What I will do with these now is give them a good drenching with a sea sol, which is a seaweed based solution in dilution, just to get them settled in. And then I'm going to hang them up just behind me over there. Actually, you can probably see my Dendrobium Hancockii just hanging over there. Made a film about that. The flowers are just going over. I'm going to hang it in the same space because basically it likes the same kind of environment. These Himalayan Dendrobiums like a bit more winter sun, bit more summer protection. Anyway, I failed before, so who am I to say? But let's see if I can make these thrive, survive, and bloom next year. Watch this space, plant lovers. So there you are, plant lovers. One of the reasons why you might want to venture back to Facebook and just have a look at Marketplace, depends where you are, but certainly in Melbourne, often fantastic orchids get offered up. So there we are. This is a few weeks later and the new growths are doing incredibly well. It's finally summer here in Melbourne and they're putting on their mad growth. But let's have a little conference about Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody. So it is a primary hybrid. That means it's a cross between two species that was made in about 1995. Often in botany, hybridized plants will have better vigor, be more pest resilient, or have different bigger flowers, better fragrance, longer lasting flowers. All manner of different characteristics tend to be sort of amped up through hybridization. So hopefully Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody will have all the vigor and vim and floralistness of its two species ancestors. I don't know, because mine hasn't bloomed yet. I bought this a little bit late in the season for flowers, so hopefully next year maybe these canes will bloom for me, but we'll see. So just who were your parents, which sounds very much like a Joan Collins 80s miniseries, but let's find out who Mummy and Daddy were. So one species ancestor is this beauty, which is Dendrobium aphyllum. There we are. Which has very pink, quite almost translucent, very beautiful flowers. And this one I think I bought on eBay very recently because I managed to kill my other quite beautiful plant. The thing is, I've not had much luck, weirdly, with these sorts of Himalayan semi-deciduous dendrobiums, which is odd because the climate is quite suitable for growing these sorts of plants in Melbourne. And so this one, Dendrobium aphyllum, comes from Southeast Asia, so Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, South East China and across into the Himalayas. So quite a wide range and up to quite high elevations, which means it can deal with cold winter minimums. And in fact, aphyllum does need that sort of cooler, drier temperatures in winter to stimulate flowers. It also needs, as does the other species ancestor of Bohemian Rhapsody, a bit of a dry rest in winter as well. And now aphyllum, you know I love a little bit of botanic nomenclature. So the aphyllum bit comes from the Greek aphylos, meaning leafless. And as you can see, perhaps there you go, as the canes mature on these plants, it loses its leaves, and it's the leafless canes that will bloom for you. So this one is maturing and starting to drop its leaves, and then we have a new growth here which will mature and drop its. Now, as I successfully killed my last one, here I have a newish plant, and it's not massively old, but it should be flowering size. So hopefully in spring we'll see some flowers on my replacement Dendrobium aphyllum. And this little baby was named in 1928. Okay, on to the next parent. So the other half of the picture is this, Dendrobium loddigesii. Now look at that. So a very different growth habit. You can see it's really tight, and I've made a video about this before. It produces huge numbers of keikis on each cane, which I thought was a sign that it was, often that's a sign of a plant not getting enough light, getting too much moisture, but it actually is just the growth habit of this dendrobium. It forms this sort of tumbleweed mass of keikis, canes and foliage. Anyway, comes from a similar part of sort of Southeast Asia, so Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam and Southeast China, but not quite as wide a range as Dendrobium aphyllum. But like aphyllum, it does like a dry winter rest, and it does need cool temperatures because once again, it's quite a high altitude plant. Both of them are epiphytes, and so both of the ones that I've got are just potted in a smallish, small to medium bark, and that's kind of it. Free draining and pretty standard for a dendrobium. But loddigesii is so interesting as a name. Now, it crops up a lot in botany because it was named after a very famous nursery family in Britain, in Hackney, in the 18th and 19th century. And the first loddigesii came over from Hanover, where he'd been a court botanist and started a nursery in Hackney, and ended up becoming some of the most famous and richest botanists or nursery people in Britain, because they were importing all these rare and amazing plants from around the world, including Australia, in the early 19th century, and selling them for vast amounts of money, but made their fortune, and their name was perpetuated. Now, the nursery closed in about 1850, and this one was named in 1887. So it was named in honor of the loddigesii family and everything they'd done for botany in Britain. Now, loddigesii was famous around Europe, in fact, the botanical world. And look at this book here, Botanical Revelations, the Peter Crossing collection. Fantastic book that I got for Christmas. And there's a really great extract about a German botanist visiting loddigesii in the 1820s. So Joseph Augustus Schultz was visiting Britain, and he wrote this description of the nursery. Mr. Conrad loddigesii appeared to us to be the largest and finest in England, a dome 80 feet long and 40 feet high, built in the form of a paraboloid purely of glass, kept together by a delicate but strong frame of small iron ribs. This dome is heated by steam. When the rays of the sun are found insufficient to warm it, a slight touch with one finger suffices to bring down from the light roof of this dome a fine shower of rain. Now, doesn't that sound like a greenhouse to die for? Well done, Mr. Loddigesii, and well deserved that quite a few plants are named after you. So this one, again, is a late spring to summer bloomer, and mine, for some reason this year, just decided not to flower. And you know what? Sometimes that just happens with orchids. They just have a bit of an off year. Dendrobium speciosum, the Australian native with massive, beautiful flowers. Everyone I've spoken to this year said, yeah, nah, didn't flower, or just a few flowers. Funny, isn't it? They just, I don't know, go in cycles and didn't want to flower this year. And it did have a dry winter, and it does get plenty of light. So anyway, never mind. The plant's looking fantastic, and hopefully it will bloom for me next year. So if we hold the two species up, loddigesii and aphyllum, you can see very, very different growth habits. You've got very long pendulous canes on aphyllum, and you've got short canes and lots of cakey growth and sort of a tumbling, matted habit with this one. Put the two together in wedded matrimony, and you get Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody. So you can see it's got the long pendulous canes, but it does have a lot of cakey growth on the stems, which you can see. So again, not something to be particularly worried about. It's just inheriting one of the traits of its ancestral parents, but lots of vigorous new growth, which is good to see. So in the growing season, so spring, summer, early autumn, plenty of water, plenty of food, and I use a topical slow release fertilizer in the mix when I repot it, as you saw in the video. And in subsequent years, a topical application of that in spring when the new shoots start to appear. Ramp up the water when you start to see new growths appear, and also fertilizing. And I just use really any kind of liquid fertilizer. It can be specifically for orchids, or it can be a generic flowering plant liquid fertilizer, or something like a tonic, which is seaweed based, or the runoff from a worm farm, worm juice or worm tea as some people call it. And again, just dilute that right down to sort of 1/8, 1/10 of what's recommended on the dose. But feed throughout the growing season, because as you can see, there's a lot of growth going on here, and we want those canes to mature, be prosperous, and bloom for us. So as you can see, I've got them outside. They get bright indirect light for most of the day, but towards the mid-afternoon, the sun really moves past. So this is south facing, which in Australia is the darker side. In the Northern Hemisphere, of course, south is sunnier. And plenty of air movement, and even in winter, that is still quite a bright spot. So they do get really great light. It's undercover, so it means I can protect them from the rain and give them that dry rest that they need through that quieter period in winter when they're not doing anything. Hopefully, once again, these canes will flower for me in the next growing season, so in spring of next year. We will see, but in the meantime, look at all the wonderful growth. So there we are, Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody, and I have pink and white. So let's see what happens over the next 12 months. I'm curious to see how these plants will grow. I'm loving being able to modify these quite cheaply bought hardware store orchid pots with these little wires, which are amazing things, which you can get from all manner of places. I know in Melbourne you can get them from a place called Collector's Corner. You can also get them on eBay if you just search for orchid equipment, orchid supplies. You should be able to find them. Anyway, that's where I got it from. I hope you've loved our deep dive into Dendrobium Bohemian Rhapsody and its interesting and storied lineage. We'll do a checkup with these again next season to see if they bloom for me and if its two species ancestors have bloomed, because we can compare all of the flowers. But from the glorious sun of Melbourne's summer, I hope all is well wherever you are, that your orchids are blooming and thriving, and I look forward to seeing you next week.